Hi everyone, good morning. It's me at 7:56 a.m. on July 15th, 2026. I just want to start a little bit of a video this morning. I've been, I don't know, nudged, hinted to, intuitive feelings, I guess, to talk about the elementals again. But also, not only with that, I would like to show you. Isn't that a pretty picture in the background, actually? I just want to say that part before we move over here. I would like to show you this. What are ultra-terrestrials? Kind of a bit of a picture here. But as you can see, the spheres in the background. Now, I did a video, I believe it is couple of them, but I'm pretty sure it was about Claudio Nocelli's work because he also expresses the different spheres on his map, which goes back to the other worlds that have to do with the Sidhe, which are the Fae. If you don't know, recognize that word that I used. That's actually the proper term. Aoshi is the proper term. Or Io. It's Ioshi. The A is spelled is pronounced differently. Anyway, the point is that the other world also goes back to the world tree, which has different spheres on it. There are spheres on the Kabbalistic tree of life. So there's a bunch of different things connected. This will also represent things like a multiverse, like each one of these spheres here would be like a different universe, right? So this is our universe, then another one, another one, another one, like that. Okay, also it can be represented like if this is our dimension here, dimension 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Like that. I know this being's a little bit scary looking, forgive me. But so I looked up what ultra-terrestrials actually are. Now, when I first heard this word, it was actually from Amy Eskridge. And she said basically that they are humans like us from the future. Which isn't wrong, but there's more to it than that. This word, I believe, is a word that is within like the government UFO community. This is their word for this type of being. So it says ultra-terrestrials are hypothesized beings that are believed to come from an entirely different realm. So again, we're not talking about planets, we're talking about planes and realms with this. So this can be an alternate universe if there are multiverses out there, like I explained when I first started talking, with the different spheres, or from a different dimension and a reality that crisscrosses ours. Now, that's what they say about the other world. There's a place called Tir Nanog, and basically there's a lot of people like me that I heard this, that they say that they have one foot in this world and one foot in another. This is a common saying for the mystic as well, but it has meaning. Now, I realize Tir Nanog is a place of eternal youth, feasting, music, dancing. It's actually the land of, like, forgive me, I don't like this term anymore, but for fairies. Most people know it as that, okay? And it's because I learned that the term fairy was actually invented by like the Christians and the religious community because they refused to call the Sidhe, let's call them just that, the Sidhe, or the good neighbors, by their actual name, like the Tuatha Dadanan or the Ayoshi, yeah, their actual name. So they called them fairies in kind of like a disrespectful way, because they didn't want to call them their proper name. So this other world crisscrosses ours. Again, it's something that runs alongside of our world. So, this article states in the past 5 years, the UFO phenomenon has taken off. Things have drastically changed in the UFO community. We no longer see UFOs as a conspiracy theory. NASA is studying UFOs, the Pentagon went all in, and astrophysicists are teaming up, as we see in the Galileo project, to take the study of UFO UAP to a whole other level. And while most of us agree that scientific study of the phenomenon should have been pioneered by experts decades ago, I agree with that, at least now we understand that this is something worthy of study. Although this is just the beginning, we have already made great progress, and the most important piece of the story was perhaps the acknowledgement of the UFO phenomenon as something of scientific interest. Because, like I said, I made a video a while ago that says it only takes one person. So even if you have 5,000 people, 4,999 of them could have a story that they've been given to just recite and make up, basically, right? But that one person could be telling the truth and a true story. And that makes it true. It only takes one. It only takes one person to say, oh my gosh, I saw a gray alien in my room. But it may not be an alien. They saw something, but then we say, okay, well, they experienced something. Now we have to figure out what it is. And that's exactly what I did with myself, right? Even though I did assume what I experienced and saw in my room in 2015 was an alien, it turned out not. And that's okay. Because it says here about, even in the end, I'll just read this part to you. Because the idea that ultra-terrestrials exist does not mean extraterrestrial beings cannot exist. It is likely that given the vastness of our universe, life developed in more places than one. Some of this life could be very, very ancient. After all, based on our best understanding of the cosmos, the universe began some 13.8 billion years ago. Life on Earth has existed in primitive forms for around 2 to 3 billion years. But see, I just want to stop there and say that we're not really aware of everything that came before us, even that we've ever found in the ground, like the dinosaurs say. There's been so many things in such a long time of this universe, of things who have come and gone, or even things that still exist but exist in another form or space in time. And so how this connects back to what Amy Eskridge said is that through my previous research, okay, I have discovered that it's very, very possible and very likely that past ancient civilizations of human beings, like say the ancient Aztecs, ancient Egyptians, things like this, civilizations like this, that they discovered interdimensional travel, not space travel. They weren't flying out to outer space. They found a different type of travel. Now, from what I understand, within these different dimensions, depending on which way you go, whether the higher dimensions, because in the higher dimensions, time runs faster. So, if you're an ancient human, and even if you were around 1,000,000 years ago, just say, you could get into one of these higher timelines, catch up to us even right now in 2026, but then keep going in the timeline, depending on how fast the time and space is moving from where you shifted to, based on my best understanding, okay? Because this really is, it seems like a bit of magic, but it is a science that we just don't quite understand yet. So, ancient humans discovered interdimensional travel. Now, it has to do with electromagnetism. They also had, they were using liquid mercury. They also had natural magnets called lodestones. This was one of the ways. This is why a lot of liquid mercury, I figure, is found at these ancient sites. Because Maybe it was at the end of their time. Maybe they were having cataclysms on the planet at their time in existence, and so they decided, well, maybe we'll just leave, right? This would be what's known as breakaway civilizations. Sometimes what I know, I'm pretty sure it's Billy Carson who talks about breakaway civilizations. Okay? So technically, they are ultra-terrestrials because they are now in another dimension. But there's much more to it than that. There's so many other beings like these Aoshi that are in a different realm. And it's not that inaccessible to us. So let me see. Different dimension. Crisscrosses. Yes, so the other worlds, the world tree. Okay. Because if honestly this was just aliens, it's a lot less complicated, right? Extraterrestrial, meaning from another planet, like we went over. But it's not just that, it's much more complicated than that. There's so much more. And here it says, technological advances described in some UFO reports could be interpreted as not so much as extraterrestrial technology, but rather ultra dimension or ultra terrestrial manifestation. See, a lot of the ultra terrestrial stuff will involve shape shifting craft. And a lot of this has to do with the beings inside using their minds to change the shape of where they're in. This is quite common. So Aether instant manifestation works like that. You think it and it becomes. Okay? That's what it is. So they're envisioning this and it creates it. I know it seems like a magic, but it's not. So so it will defy our laws of physics, be doing things that doesn't seem natural, and it will seem supernatural to us. But like I said, the shape-shifting thing, what did I think of earlier about this? Shapeshifter. Skinwalker is another term for shapeshifter, one who wears many skins. That's a shapeshifter. So the skinwalker is dangerous. It's the same thing as what we're talking about when we talk about beings like Jinn, which are beings of the unseen realm, which also include the Fae. Look, I know that fairies have been portrayed to us like they're sweet little Tinkerbells, but the old stories from the Irish, which have been documented not just in writing, but from older individuals from their society. I watched a lot of it over the past few weeks, and they said that if you answer these beings in the wrong way, that they will rip your throat out. And not just like give you a scolding, no, literally tear out your throat. This is why I suggested, and this isn't to cause fear, or it's because they are a different kind of being. They weren't created wrong. They were made exactly as they were meant to be made. And what I learned from studying with like in the Muslim religion about jinn, right? What they say about them is that the jinn were sent here to take care of, that means exterminate, something that was much more evil than they were before. And I don't think that it would be counted out that they will do that again. And guess what's much more evil than them now? Us. So I've kind of connected it back to where the whole culling would come from. I just have to get all this out before I forget. So the culling, and it's not only just like an alien invasion type of thing. No. This is going to be hard. Elementals are responsible for the weather. Elementals are responsible for even earthquakes, heat waves, floods, tornadoes. This is why when a person goes missing at one of those national parks, if you listen to David Paulides and his missing 411 cases, a lot of the times a storm will occur. There's a reason for that. It's because they get together and they create a weather event. Now, I watched a man's video not long ago where he says the worst thing that can happen is if the elementals and the nature spirits and all of that gain up against us and all of this. I tried to post all of these things on my Telegram, but I think I'm going too quickly for many people to keep up. So I'm going to try and report these things to you as best as I can, because I feel like they want people to know this. Like I said, we've poisoned the air, we've poisoned the ocean, we've poisoned the ground. We thought that we were the only ones here, but these beings were here before us, and they will be here after us. And I know, like, this doesn't, like, go through all that much, this article here, okay? Because a lot of the times what I explained before about different dimensions, what I noticed in my observations with this is that a lot of people think maybe the craft is taking off at fast and light speed. We have different types, and there's some that are man-made. But the one thing that I'm talking about is it almost seems like it gets really small. Like it goes beep, and it like pops out of our space. It just disappears. And this is interdimensional travel. It's just going to look like it disappears right in front of your eyes. But really, it's shifting into another dimension. Okay? But over here, okay, because I didn't even finish this. I stopped it at 3:07, and I was like, you know what? I know I have to at least begin to deliver this message. But look at this. It says right here, wait, where'd it go? We were in slavery under the elemental spiritual forces of the world, but it says before Jesus, before the Christ came, we were under the slavery of the elemental spiritual forces of the world, just like now. You got to remember, they blame everything on the reptilians, but the reptilians are really the salamanders, and the salamanders are the element of fire. Everything's on fire right now. Even my own province is on fire right now. The heat waves, the fire, the flooding, the tornadoes, the extreme weather events. Right now, it is so yellow outside because of the heat, not only from the smoke, but I have this feeling that we're going to have like a really strong thunder and lightning storm with rain. Because I don't know, I know it's funny, but they dance. So the elementals start to dance together and they'll create a storm. I don't know how I know this, I just do. And this is why I wrote in my book about having a dance-off with the aliens. Well, they're not aliens, they're elemental spirits. I had no idea what I was dealing with. And this is why it makes it so dangerous, because it's not aliens. It is truly the spiritual realms. And this also includes some darker things. But the reason why I'm showing you this right now is that right now we're also under the slavery of the spiritual elemental forces of the world. Not just the weather, you guys, but this is what they're talking about, that the reptilians control things. The reptilians are the beings of fire. I know it may not make sense, so if this is something new to you, I have done a lot of videos on the elementals. This is something that I found in the Secret Teachings of All Ages, a book that was written by Manly P. Hall. I believe it's found on page 279 And it is called, this is just by memory, by the way, so I might have it wrong. Check the description about the page. But it's called The Elements and Their Inhabitants. And when I read it, I was reminded of the Greys, the Reptilians, and the Nordics. Okay, so let me break it down for you real quick, and then I have to turn the video off because I've exhausted my energy. But listen. So, when you have UFO that are flying in the tops of mountains, these are the beings of the air, and they are known as sylphs. But also, now in 2026 as aliens, they are the Nordics. The blonde, tall, attractive beings, but they are sylphs. And some of them would be categorized as fae. Okay? Think of it that way, like the elves in Lord of the Rings. So then, when you have beings going into volcanoes, now again, these things aren't going into the mountain or the volcano. They're going in and then they're switching dimensions into their own world. That's what that is. They don't live inside the mountains. They switch dimensions. Interdimensional being means the spaces in between spaces. I know. I barely understand it myself. My write-up of what I wrote, my special message, explains it a little bit better. So, this is the same thing. When you see these UFO going into volcano, they're not taking samples, you guys. They don't need to be doing this over and over and over and over again. It makes no sense. What they need that for? It doesn't matter how many species. You know, like they would know that what's in the lava samples. They don't need this. So this is how I figured this out myself. So they must be going in there for another purpose. And this would be, like I said, they go into the volcano, you switch dimensions, you're in a totally different space. It might even be the same planet, it just looks a little different, and the people that live there aren't the same clearly. This is why we see shadow people in our homes sometimes, because it's almost like another layer over our reality that we just can't perceive. You know? That's why sometimes, like, it may be that it just might be multiple Earths, but like different happenings on the same Earth in a different space. Okay? So they are switching spaces. They go into the volcano, they switch spaces, then they are in their home. And of course, they would have to go into somewhere where the element from which they came. I don't know if there's portals in there or what, but that would be what it was, because there's ones that come from under the water and they go back in the water. These would be the undines, okay? Now the ones that are going in the volcanoes, the fire element is salamander. Sorry, I skipped that. The salamanders. And I'm thinking these sound like the reptilians. It even talks about armor. It talks about robes. And how often do you see a reptilian in a black robe? Well, it's literally, it's been turned around against us because a lot of these beings like to play tricks to amuse themselves. They think it's funny to play tricks on humans. They don't have very much to do over there. So telling us that they're aliens is fun for them. Yeah. And then the last one is the ones that come from underground. Which aliens did we find underground? Which aliens did Phil Schneider find underground, if you know anything about the UFO history? The Greys, right? Well, guess which beings of elementals live underground? Gnomes. And it even says in there that they're melancholy of darkness, and they're of like the winter. So it'd be like depression and death and darkness and stuff like that. Because they not only they have elements of the weather, but they also have elements of like us in a way. So some of them, like for instance, the reptilians with fire, think about passion, think about, that's why they're so sexual. Again, this is why they always have the sex thing going on with the reptilians, because this is also a trait of the fire element, except it's not always good. Sometimes these things can be negative too, right? There's positive, negative aspects in all things, just like us. So yeah, the undines would be like mermaids and underwater beings, and they are of the element of fire. And so when you see UFO going underwater, again, this is the element of water, and they are water beings. So that's just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. But they say, it says right here, we were under the slavery of elemental spiritual forces of the world. And I mean, it says that we're dealing with spiritual forces and principalities and all that. There's so many clues. But I learned a lot, and I put it together from what I was taught about the word like Jinn, and how they told me there's so many different things. Even what they say about cleaning your house at night and pouring out water, that's the same in Ireland, because especially boiling water, because you don't want to burn one of the little people, the good neighbors, the she. So there's so many things that connect, and we give them a different name, but it's all the same thing. We think it's different, but it's not. So what people think reptilian aliens are, it's not. They're actually elementals. And this has been around for a long time. We just think they're not real. Now, nature spirits are something that's different, and elemental spirits are different. But elementals are actual people like us who were here before us a long time ago. See, even, okay, I know some people are going to roll their eyes and not get it, but listen, Sarah Adams, in her first interview that I watched, talked about, right, with, what was his name? Miles Johnson, with her super soldier thing. She talked about elemental earth, air, fire, and water coming together to create the planet. This is what we're talking about. God, the divine creator, is not a magician. It needs hands. That's why it says God works through people. So she really did have a point, because they were here long before us, the elements, and they will be here long after us. They take care of stuff like that. So massive earthquakes would be them. Huge earthquakes that cause tsunamis, that's the earth beings and the water. I know it sounds wacky, but you have to see it in like a spiritual, shamanistic point of view even. If we don't stop harming our world, our planet, and each other and nature, like, oh man, they're gonna start fighting back. This is not a joke. I know a lot of people aren't gonna take it seriously and laugh out loud, but it is not a joke. And it's very serious, and I put it off for quite some time because I didn't know exactly how to tell you. But this is part of it, and they're trying to get us to pay attention. I believe it is my duty to tell you these things. That we are not being told the truth about aliens, and that it is imperative and so important that we understand what this is, or it will have dire consequences for us. And I do believe that there are two forces, because the thing about it is these elementals, okay, they can reproduce physically. So that means that people who said they were sexually assaulted by aliens, it makes me think of Geraldine. I think her last name starts with O, but I can't remember what it is. I'll put it up on the screen with her photo. She talked about hybrid breeding programs. Listen, they have to hybridize with us because their offspring will have souls by mating with us. They do not have souls like we do. Once they die forever. But they are immortal until they die. But once they're gone forever. This is what I've come to understand, okay? So this is why they don't come here very often. Because if they do get iced, they're iced for good. This is why they send their little EBEs, because it's safer. If the little EBE, the little tiny gray that seems like almost like a little robot, if they die, it's no big deal. And yes, they do. They create these things so that they don't have to get killed themselves. Yeah. Because if they get iced, like I said, they don't come back. Not even in reincarnation. Not like us. But this is why they're breeding with us, because their offspring will. it's not necessarily, let's not just jump to evil, sinister conclusions right away. Let's just try our best to understand, like I am right now. So, yes, the elementals can reproduce physically, but the nature spirits do not. Okay? The nature spirits arise like when you step on a flower and kill it or pluck it, a spirit arises from it as that flower's spirit, as a nature spirit. Okay? That's its etheric energy. So they do not reproduce physically, but these beings do. So you have to understand that even if David Wilcock was aware about the elemental part of this, and this is why he was so terrified of the wind, because these beings control the wind. If he knew this, he couldn't tell us. See, I was getting a lot of information in the in-between time. I made a video before this, actually going over, like making a little bit of review about James Franco. And it was in the in-between hours, and I didn't want to talk about the beings of the in-between at that time.
Is this a UFO going through the portal? That light you see is a portal. Look close from right to left. Saw that? It's gonna get closer. It's gonna zoom in. But you see something go inside and then it closes up. I'm calling portal. What y'all think? What do you feel? That's a portal.
Where'd it go? There it goes.
Olha lá, de novo, ó. Olha que doideira, cara, olha lá, ô Gelson, olha, cara, que doideira! Ela descendo de novo, ela vai sumir dentro da mata. Olha lá, ó, vai sumir dentro da mata. Olha lá, cara. Olha lá, de novo, ó. Olha que doideira, cara, olha lá, ô Gelson, olha, cara, que doideira! Ela descendo de novo, ela vai sumir dentro da mata. Olha lá, ó, vai sumir dentro da mata. Olha lá, cara.
UFO entrando na montanha.